At least the minister did. It's a really long tradition that brings me to an evening after a long day, maybe about a decade ago. I arrive home and see a new red Netflix DVD there. Remember when people used to get DVDs from Netflix? All right. Anyway, I snuggle up on the couch for some time in a place free from the concerns and the worries of my human life. And as the fancy Blu-ray player I had fires up, I see the great blue marble of our Earth come into focus on my screen, and the title of my favorite series appears, The Blue Planet. The Blue Planet, I know my people. The Blue Planet is one of those documentaries that is shot so beautifully that it almost forces people to buy high-definition televisions. And the grandfatherly voice of David Attenborough, one of the world's foremost documentarians, fills the surround sound speakers, and I am awash in the visual, the auditory, the sensory splendor of that oh so holy night. And then it happens. The cameras take a new course, and they leave the churning, undulating blueness of the surface, plunge past the upper sun-sparkling layers teeming with the ocean life I'd come to treasure through this documentary series, and descend ever deeper into the deep. The episode I'd so haplessly selected, entitled The Deep, featured exploration of the deepest, previously undiscovered stretches of the ocean floor, the kinds of life forms that dwell at the kinds of depths that we are talking about are truly otherworldly. You might say they were downright terrifying. I might say they were downright unholy looking. One of the first animals you meet is a segmented creature that travels around in a sort of dome where it stores up all the eggs that it's made. And the camera takes us up close to this animal, and it looks vicious to our human eyes. And there is a reason for that, because right at the moment that our grandfatherly David Attenborough mentions offhandedly, as only a knighted Briton can do, that we are looking at the animal that the creature in Alien is based on. Many would argue that seeing Alien for the first time was a borderline unholy experience. Then, not long after invoking one of the scariest movies of all time, he says, offhandedly, again, we are now descending into the Twilight Zone. He makes no allusion to the television series with Rod Serling that we all love. I don't know what kind of monster tells an audience you're entering the Twilight Zone and actually means it. And in fairness, the zone of the ocean that we were entering, that we were passing through, I later found out is actually called the Twilight Zone. It's a technical term that describes the place where the last and the strongest rays of light reach their end. It's where the sunlight must set on our journey that we're all taking now to the deep. Until we pass through that twilight and we are together there in the deepest, darkest place, a place of eternal night. Perhaps more troubling than any creature revealed in the lights of the underwater submersibles in the deep was the revelation that more humans have walked in space than have explored the deepest shores of the sea. The abyssal plain, it's a good word, which is 2.5 miles under the surface of the water, covers half of the surface of this planet. At the time of the filming The Deep, only 1% of the entire surface area of the abyssal plain had ever been explored. In fairness, today it's more like 10%. And every time another expedition goes into the abyssal plain, new forms of life are discovered. In fact, David Attenborough tells us that if you divide the time humans have spent exploring the abyssal plain, by the number of new forms of animal life discovered there, humans discover new life at a rate of a new species every 10 minutes that they spend in the abyssal plain. Now, for those of you wondering, no, you have not accidentally wandered into a grant writing workshop for deep sea exploration initiatives, though we could spend our time in worse ways than that. We are talking about something that we, in this place, are maybe specially qualified to consider here on this island. We heard our story from Jardín. We stand or sit or whatever it is that we do in the shadow of what is the tallest mountain on the face of the earth. Many people do not know that Mauna Kea, if you measure from peak to base, is the tallest mountain that we have on the face of the earth. Boom. I just saw you below in the back end. So, that's right. I got you. So, we live on this most remote, inhabited outpost surrounded by this ocean of blue. So we're talking about this search for truth, a search for meaning that others have undertaken far below the surface that many of us see every day. So many of us undertake, of course, our own searches when we come into any Unitarian Universalist space, whether for a Sunday or for a generation or two. Most people don't just stumble in to a Unitarian Universalist space. Many, many of us arrived here along a course that we had charted for ourselves on our own journey, and many of us just hitched a ride on somebody else's journey, showed up, and just kind of liked it, which we'll take all comers. But after we arrived, we faced the challenge so common in a tradition that seeks freedom of mind and of body and of spirit, that seeks freedom so wholly. We find the challenge of exploring so many ideas, searching through so many of the truths of so many faiths, scouring sources far and wide for meaning, that we often wonder if we will ever really find answers. On our journey, will we ever find answers out here when the questions that we're seeking to answer are coming from in here? And many of these questions come into stark relief this time of year, right? This is the time that holds a lot for people. The meaning so many of us spent a lifetime making out of celebrations of this time of year, the reflecting many do on the change in the year, the tilt of the very earth moving back to warm this hemisphere we call home. There are so many ways that we take on this meaning of these days. It was so many years ago now when a prophetic voice of a child rang through the hearts of millions to address the ways a world was losing its way. So many listened with full and open ears when this little child declared to the world the words we hear so much this time of year: good grief. Yeah, it was 53 years ago, this week, that the Charlie Brown we know and love witnessed too much of commercialization of this time of year and spoke his catchphrase aloud, good grief. But lamenting commercialization this many years later, at this point, for many of us, is really kind of a surface issue. It kind of goes without saying. It's one that churns and bubbles along the tides of our lives. But the deeper, more powerful truths of how people experience this time of year are also hidden there in Charlie Brown's fateful words, good grief. A friend told me this week that celebrations and travel and plans he's making this year are just harder than they've been before and just different. This is the first time he'll be going through this time of year since his father passed away. And the grief he's experiencing is entirely entirely changing how he sees this time of year. Just talking to him, I could see the difference he spoke of, the detachment, the pain of missing someone he loves, of remembering someone he loves. It's right there in his eyes, right on the surface. Because one of the ways that grief changes our universe is by taking things from us that used to be out here and forcing them to live only in here. The feelings, the songs, the practices, even some of the ceremonies we know so well at this time of year hold so many reminders, so many memories of all that we've known on our journeys. For some, that means fond memories of this time of year, of people and places, experiences we enjoyed. But those same memories now may be forever altered or changed through loss or maybe through estrangement. And still for others, this time of year may be a reminder of a generosity that never came, whether from a supernatural being or from someone else in our lives, and taking part again in so much of what surrounds this time is an aching reminder of the grief, the sense of loss,